I do it again? I did it again. I left the darn. See, I will get used to this one day, Nicholas. One day I will remember to turn the stupid panel thing up. Anyway, how are you, Nicholas? How are you doing?
I'm hanging in there. It's supposed to be the calmest time of the year for me professionally, and
Mm,
of course, I managed to pack my schedule full of other things.
I don't know what that's like at all, and I cannot sympathize. So we're not on that one. Yeah, no, I mean, it is a busy time of the year. It's also a really rough time of the year. So hello, everybody, this is Getting Stoned with Devin and Nicholas. I am Devin, and that is Nicholas. I think I'm pointing the right way. And we're both professional authors and crystal people. Nicholas, I would say you're more of a crystal nerd than I am. I think that's an easy, clear thing. You went to school, you went schooling for this. I'm just a big amateur fan who has surrounded himself with stones and loves them. But definitely you have a very special relationship to crystals. So for people who are just tuning in for the first time, just real quick, who are you? I mean, don't give us your origin story, but you've written some books. What books have you written, Nicholas?
Well, thank you for that, Devin. People will probably know me best for my work on crystals from books like Crystal Basics Pocket Encyclopedia, Stones of the Goddess, and a whole bunch of others. I'm also a longtime Reiki practitioner and teacher with a book out on Reiki. In 2022, I put out a book on flower essences as well. So I stay busy, which is something you also have in common.
Yeah. I've let's see. I think we counted the other day, and I think I'm at 14 different like book publishy thingies, whether I produced it or I wrote it or one of those things. One of the and particularly Crystal Magic for the Modern Witch, which is this gorgeous book. I will show it off at some point. We've got some of your books to show off as well. But we love our crystals, and today we're going to talk about amber. And I think amber is a perfect stone for this. And you were like politicking to do amber for this particular set of topics because it's the holiday season and it's also freaking cold and it gets dark at 4:30 and it's like all of these. I mean, if you're in the US and we have daylight savings time, can we just end the torture of daylight savings time now? Can we please do that? Anyway, so it's a rough time, and I am somebody who I learned as I got older suffers from seasonal affective. Like I have the sad, like it happens. And I have had to do a lot of things in my life to help correct that, like when those things happen. And one of those things is working with crystals, of course. And so we're going to be talking about that in relationship to amber and all of those things. But we're going to go beyond the topics of amber today because that's what we're going to do. And so let's dive in. Let's talk about the holidays real quick. Let's talk about surviving this time of year. As a metaphysical person, as a crystal person, as somebody who interacts with energy. And not only do we have the changing of the seasons and those things going on, but also we're stuck with family. We're stuck with people and in situations we normally wouldn't. So there's going to be a lot of uncomfort, a lot of discomfort going on. Nicholas, what are your thoughts on, as a metaphysical person, what should we be paying attention to this time of year as we're moving through to keep ourselves intact, to keep our energies whole?
I mean, it's the basics. It's always the basics that are going to be the things that get us through. So it's having good psychic hygiene, cleansing yourself, your space, your tools, whatever you can as regularly as possible. Taking time to consciously ground and center on a regular basis. Really making sure that you practice healthy self-care. Like, it's holiday season. For anyone who's celebrating in any way that you can, like, do things that are indulgent, do things that are special, do them without guilt, because I think sometimes our baggage and projections that we've got, oh, spiritual folks need to, always be on, or whatever it's going to be, that can be challenging, that can be problematic, that can be toxic. So we've got to be willing to just be as human as possible this season. And that's kind of one of the...
How dare you?
I know, it's awful, right?
How dare you?
So, like, eat the stuff you're going to eat. And if you are a sensitive tummy person like me, do what you got to do. Find time away from the noise, the stress, the stimulus. Have that extra cup of tea. Try to practice rest. Nature slows down in the wintertide. So if you're here in the Northern Hemisphere, even if you're as far south as I am, the shifting daylight patterns and temperatures and all that stuff, they affect you on a really deep and profound way. So just
Yeah.
make sure that you're mindful of that.
I'm 100%. I've been doing a lot of cleansing work. And my birthday is December 7th. So I share a birthday month with Jesus. Not really, but but he always gets all the attention. And so this year I was like, no, I'm gonna make sure it's time to celebrate me, because I'm always the guy that's like, no, you don't have to get me anything. No, no, no. I make a big deal out of everyone else's birthdays. I am not a person who likes necessarily to have a big deal made out of his birthday, but I really want you to, because I also have Scorpio and Venus. It's a whole thing, or Venus and Scorpio. But anyway, so this year I was like, I'm gonna put a concerted effort to giving myself some positive energy and not being in a space of feeling overwhelmed or tired or whatever. Like, I'm really gonna put the brakes on and check in with myself. And I'm so glad that I did, because it has shifted my interactions with people. It has shifted the way that I'm looking at life right now. I'm so glad I put the brakes on at the early part of December, checked in with myself, and then asked myself, like, what do I really need right now, especially as we're preparing to go into the new year, right? And the big thing that came through loud and clear was, you need to do cleansing work. Like, we should all be doing cleansing work this time of year. We have a lot of prep work for new beginnings to happen. But the flip side of it also is that because the energy, this is what my spirits were talking about, because the energy is so heavy and it's so dense right now, we really need to be amping up that cleansing work, period. Like, I mean, just in general, if you're like me and you get, you get a little sad, like that's one thing we can do. Cleansing work, we can help kind of push through a little bit of that if we're working on that in tandem with whatever else you need to do with your mental health. But you're also creating an abundance of energy. You're creating an abundance of vibes that you're going to have to be sitting in and rolling around in and baking cookies in and like all of that. So really making sure that you're cleansing and really making sure that we're amping up the like you said, the foundational stuff. Like, it's really time to get back to the roots and connect with those foundational practices that we probably forgot throughout the rest of the year because we've been busy and because we've been doing all of this stuff. So for me right now, it's all about the cleansing. It's all about preparing for interactions with people that I know I'm probably not going to want to have, just because it's the holidays. And I love everyone. I want everyone to feel loved, but at the same time, it can be a little much sometimes. I got bandwidth, and I can only have so much of that. So speaking of that, so what do you do when you're overwhelmed? So we're going into the holidays. So many of us are feeling overwhelmed right now. For me, my crystal allies, especially when I'm trying to avoid getting into amber just yet, but for me, this time of year, the crystal allies that I'm really reaching forward, especially in the realm of being overwhelmed or feeling overwhelmed, are sunstone and sodalite. Those two stones are like my BFFs right now. I'm working a lot with sunstone to help alleviate the lack of sun energy, right? Like, that kind of makes sense. But sodalite's been excellent in helping me to figure out and prioritize where I need to be putting that psychic energy and that cleansing energy. So I'm going to ask you, what stones are you grabbing for right now as you're trying not to be overwhelmed and you're trying to keep your energy safe and protected?
Labradorite is always one of my favorites for this. It's always near me when I have to interface with the general public. Like, it sits here on my desk at all times, but I also wear it. I use it for some fun shielding techniques, to kind of generate this shield of labradorite energy around me to filter out things that aren't serving me, so that way I can really turn my attention on the things that are helpful.
Yeah.
And lately it's clear quartz. I'm doing a lot of work with just good old fashioned quartz. I'm like an old school quartz lover. I have been if I could collect only one mineral species from now until the end of time, it would be quartz, because I'd never get bored.
Yeah.
But I'm doing a lot of work with as clear and transparent and kind of like optical quality quartz as I can, to really kind of bring this sense of clarity and sense of light into everything else that I'm doing.
I love that. I really love that. Ben is asking, so are we telling them that they need to buy as many crystals as they can and roll around in them? Always. I mean, as long as they're not pointy, but I think always. Like, one of my favorite experiences is I was at a festival and I woke up one morning and there was a piece of fluorite stuck to my ass. And I didn't know for like 5 minutes. I was just walking around the room with a piece of fluorite on my ass. And it was the greatest thing ever. And I felt truly touched and blessed. So roll around in crystals. I think it's a fantastic thing. while we are on the topic of clear quartz, and I am triggered by the thought every single time we talk about quartz that there are planets and there are probably asteroids and things out there in the universe that have big chunks of quartz. Just they're comprised of quartz, the same quartz that we have here on our planet. That is amazing to me. But do you know what couldn't exist anywhere else? Any other planet? You know, it could not exist anywhere else. Amber. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, not the amber we have. That would be an impossibility unless we have like a clone planet or something. And the reason for that is that amber is a tricky, interesting. It's not a stone. It's not a crystal. It is something organic, and that makes it, in my mind, actually extra special. So I guess we'll shut up about dealing with the holidays for the moment, and let's talk about our principle today, which is amber, and working with amber specifically. As we can, through this time of year. But I'm going to flip it over to you because you're the smart one. Let's talk about amber. Let me pull up some of those images for you, though. You let me know when you want me to switch over.
Sure. So amber, as Devin said, is not actually a rock, not technically. We consider it a fossil, but it's still organic in nature. So it hasn't been mineralized. It hasn't been, replaced by other minerals by a process of pseudomorphosis like we see in other kinds of things. So it's kind of a special topic. We consider it to be an organic gemstone. We can still call it a gem. Gem materials don't, strictly speaking, have to be rock or mineral in nature, but this is certainly mineral adjacent. You can find it in sedimentary rock sometimes, but you're more likely to find it washed up on the shore like you would here. This is probably the coast of the Baltic Sea. And we see a natural little nugget of amber that's just shown up, a gift from the ocean itself. Most amber that we find in the Baltic region is somewhere in the ballpark of like 20 to 50 million years old. And it originated as a resin, like a tree sap kind of, from these ancient evergreen trees. And when burned or melted today, you'll see that it has, or your smell rather, that it has the aroma of evergreen trees. It can be full of other organic things like this very ancient insect that you see trapped in this specimen. You can find bits of foliage and flowers and pollen and all kinds of other things can be preserved inside there. And it is basically just super old resin, and it has undergone some kind of change or transformation in the earth, but not as heavy a mineralization as we find in like dinosaur bones or petrified wood or anything like that. But what I love about amber, well, among the things that I love about amber, is the variation in color and texture and pattern that we see. We often think of these kind of warm golden honey-like hues, amber colored if you will, but you can find milky and greenish and reddish and orange and even bluish ambers from time to time. It doesn't all fall into the kind of yellow, gold, or brown end of the spectrum. And it's fun because it's mostly hydrocarbons. It's all organic stuff, which means it's going to behave energetically a little bit differently to our average quote unquote crystals, especially given that it lacks a crystal structure. So on the screen here, we've got one of my favorite varieties. We find this most frequently in the Dominican Republic as well as in Indonesia, and they call it blue amber. And it's not actually blue. And I'm sure if you're looking on screen, you would love to say, but it's blue. And it is not blue in transmitted light. Like if you let light pass through it, it's going to be the color of any other variety of amber, but it has a really unique property called daylight fluorescence, which means that just in ambient sunlight, there is enough sensitivity to the UV, the ultraviolet wavelengths in natural full spectrum light, that it will fluoresce without having to be in a dark room. Now, of course, if you take it to a dark room and put it under a UV light exclusively, it'll glow almost a neon blue to blue-white. But this particular kind of amber can also exhibit some other really fun properties. Some of the Indonesian stuff will look reddish or greenish depending on how thick or thin it is as well, in transmitted light. In other words, when light is behind it. And that's from a property called the Usambara effect. And this was first discovered in tourmalines from a place, I believe in Tanzania, named Usambara. And essentially what happens is the more of a material with this property that light has to travel through, the slower it moves, and therefore the wavelengths become longer and longer. So in thin sections, very thin cross sections of this kind of amber, it'll appear green. But the thicker that piece of amber is, the more towards the red end of the spectrum it will appear. So you'll find a lot of kind of reddish brown ambers that come from places like the Dominican Republic and Indonesia that could be red. You could also take two greenish pieces, stack them in front of one another and let the light pass through both, and then it will appear red because you've doubled the amount of light. Yeah.
That's so insane. Yeah. And for people who don't follow color theory and stuff, that's not supposed to happen. That's very weird. So how common is that as far as a phenomenon in amber?
I mean, a lot of the Indonesian stuff, I'd say the majority of the Indonesian amber that I've handled will do that. It's really fun if you can find like polished slabs of it on display in a crystal shop, because then you can just pick up several of them and like hold one to the light, hold two to the light, stack a third one, and you'll watch the color change. And any one of them, as long as they're the same thickness, will be relatively the same color. But when you stack them, it changes how light moves through, and it is wild.
Amber is one of the stones that is the easiest to rip off. It's the easiest to augment. It's the easiest. I mean, because it melts down. I mean, it's resin. So one of the things that I didn't know, we had this. So in the shop, when I had a crystal shop, we had a big sphere of reconstituted amber, and it sat there forever. It was very light compared to some other pieces that I later on would find and be like, oh, but so there were some tells there, but we had it in there forever. And the person explained to us that the process involved, they melted chunks of amber down and then formed basically a chunk, and then basically carved it out, and then you had this ball. But it was amber. And we find out years later, I go to Tucson and I'm buying for the shop, and I get big bags of amber that have been reconstituted. And I'm thinking, well, whatever, it's the same thing. It's just melted and it's clearer. It's going to be prettier. And then I get home and I start doing a deeper dive, and I discover, nay, that is not quite the process involved in reconstituted amber. So let's talk about that, because that's probably like, if you go into a crystal shop and you see like cheap amber, that's what it is. Because real amber is actually precious. I mean, it is expensive. It is harder to find. It is not an easy thing, and that's why we rip it off. I mean, that's why people rip it off. So let's talk about that process of reconstituting amber and how, in your opinion, that affects the vibration of amber.
So, really, we have several processes that will be used and erroneously labeled reconstituted amber. I've learned in the last few years, my last trip to Tucson especially, I did some deeper diving. A lot of stuff gets called reconstituted amber when it is in fact nothing more than plastic. And that is a separate problem. This is what we call a simulant, where we take a synthetic substance that is not the same composition or structure, or doesn't have any of the other properties. It just kind of looks like it. And it can be, popped into a mold and cut and polished, or tumbled. You find a lot of tumbled amber that is actually reconstituted. And once you know what you're looking for, it's very easy to see. That's one thing. Now, with the reconstituted amber out there, we can find a couple different things. We find some that are warmed and pressed together. Small fragments of amber will be reconstituted in this way and have been for hundreds of years. You can find antique amber jewelry that is reconstituted like that. Another process that can be done is the actual melting of it, but in a lot of cases, the melted stuff, as we heat it to a liquid temperature, other organic compounds in it will burn, and it will lose clarity and change color and do all sorts of other stuff. The third thing that I see being sold as reconstituted amber is where they will take natural amber and suspend it in resin or plastic. So you'll see like little chunks of natural amber inside an otherwise simulated matrix to hold it all together. So, ultimately, if we're actually reconstituting it, if we're melting it down, we're changing its chemistry, because some
Yeah.
things will burn off. It has long been used as a source of fragrance and aroma,
Hmm.
um, as an incense. And that's where some of its very ancient uses and names come from. And then if we're, of course, introducing plastic to it, we're not working with pure amber, and that's a separate
Hmm.
issue, but one that we do have to be mindful of.
Yeah. Yeah. And amber is, so it's funny because the scent amber is not amber.
Correct.
It is ambergris esque, and that is a very different thing. So when we talk about burning it, which if I remember, I want to say it was like Socrates or it was either Socrates or Plato had gone out and they were trying to figure out what amber was, because it was everywhere. It was rushing up on the shores. They couldn't figure out what it was. And he finally was like, "Oh, give me a chunk." And then he just burned it. And that is how they'd figured out, oh, okay, it's actually this thing. But for years, they didn't know what it was. And so it has this wonderful history of being used in ritual and in ceremony as something that is a cleansing aid and things like that, a ritual prep aid. It does have a very interesting psycho kind of active effect to it when it's burned. That's a whole other thing. But so there's some potent magic there. I mean, I really have to say that. But when we go into the store and you buy amber incense, you're actually getting ambergris, which
Right.
is a vanilla-esque kind of musky thing that comes from an animal, and that's a whole other gross thing we don't need to talk about.
Right.
But but it's one of those things that people will get confused. And I grew up in the world of the Victoria's Secret amber spray, like, and everybody was covered in it. It was either that or cucumber melon, and everyone was just covered in it. And it was the color of amber. It was supposed to be amber, and it was not amber. It was different. So it's one of those things that when we had a shop, people would come in and we would have this conversation a lot with people, but they are two different things. So what is your favorite way to work with amber? Because it's unique and it's light, it's easy to carry. I keep an eye out when I'm shopping for amber, which granted I haven't done in a while, but when I'm shopping for amber, I like to find the dirty stuff. Like I don't want it to be like because sometimes you get the stuff where it's got chunks of bark sticking out of it and stuff like that. I don't necessarily want that dirty, but I like it to have inclusions. I like it to have some discoloration in the middle of it. I want to see I love the swirl patterns that you see sometimes in those natural. That's the stuff that I go for. And for me, energetically, I work with it for a lot. As which we work with amber and jet a lot, and they're both in their own way very. I mean, it's a trippy thing. So amber, obviously, petrified resin. You have you have jet, which is petrified burnt wood, essentially. I mean, that's basically what it is, right? Am I correct in saying that?
Not necessarily burnt, but it's not like lithified or paramineralized like we find in
Right.
like traditional petrified wood, but it is a fossilized wood that comes from Araucaria species, or the monkey pestle trees.
So is it burned? Is that a true thing? No. Okay. All right.
And,
So that's just it's been decomposed and then compressed. Is that
yeah, it's in that hypoxic environment,
beautiful?
and
That's sexy.
it creates that deep dark color with really good examples. You can actually find the wood grain in jet, and it will often be squished. You'll see that it has
Mhm.
been stretched and flattened because it has been literally squished by the weight of all the
Smashed.
sediment above it. And so, those are two substances that have been used in related forms throughout history. We sometimes see the nickname in several languages of witches amber applied to jet, because they both take a similar polish. They're both lightweight. They both float in salt water. They're both flammable. They both obviously come from a
Mhm.
vegetable source originally, but one is the color of sunshine and the other is the color of midnight, and
Mhm.
they just are these wonderful complementary forces. But when it
Yeah.
comes to actually working with amber, I think it is great as a seasonal stone. It's one I often recommend to people who are going through seasonal affective disorder, because
Mhm.
if we think about what it is, it's sunshine made solid. It is,
Mhm.
you know,
Literally. I mean, it's
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
the trees
That's
photosynthesize, they draw in
mhm.
sunlight, and that is
Hella
used to power
magical.
every process inside them,
Yeah.
including the extrusion of resin. So um, it's just great when we need a dose of sunshine, a
Liquid
reminder of
sunlight.
success and sovereignty and warmth. And we all need that from time to time.
Mhm. Yeah, I am a big fan of amber water. So just making a crystal water with it. It is, especially this time of year, it's really great. Add it to my coffee. Like I do all the things. It is an invaluable tool as a magical person this time of year, especially. But I feel like it's one of those stones because it is so closely related to the sun and the processes of the sun that summertime is that's when I take my stones out, my amber, my sunstone, and some citrines and some other things. All my sunny stones, I take them out. I try to charge them up during the summer months so that when I need that energy in the winter months, it is readily available, and that has become a very very invaluable tool. Another thing to do would be to take a bath with your amber. Do it, do it, do it. It is so good. It feels so good, and you won't smell like anything afterwards, except for what you put in your bathtub. But it'll feel really nice on your energy body, and that's something that I've grown accustomed to doing at least on Sundays because I'm one of those astrology people and I like to sync my stuff up. So when it comes to companions for amber, we already talked about jet and that relationship, but what other stones are copacetic? What other stones work well with amber in your experience?
I'm generally of the opinion that combining crystals is a lot like combining flavors. We all have different palates. We're going to have different nutritive needs, so we're going to mix and match what feels good to us. Some things that I personally enjoy because of the evidence we see in the historical and paleontological and archaeological records are things like amber and gold work really well together. The Wessex culture that's responsible for a lot of the tombs and even some of the megaliths that we see in southwest Britain, including Stonehenge. The Wessex culture is responsible for that megalithic site as well. They left a lot of amber behind. They left some amber in jewelry, including amber set in gold, that was thought to have been a kind of solar talisman. So I think those are some energies that work super well together. We could use it alongside quartz because quartz kind of condenses and focuses light. It acts like a prism and a lens to help redirect that light energy. So we can kind of bring that sunshine into something very tangible through the combination of those two stones. If we want to focus on kind of warding ourselves, protecting our space with the power of that sunshine, with that power of light and flame. We could combine it with flint, which has long been used for starting fires. Maybe flint and pyrite together, which it is believed may have actually been used to ignite fire as far back as like the Neanderthal era. There's some kind of sketchy evidence. Academics are on either side of the debate here, but they might have used the combination of pyrite and flint to start fires for any number of things. So they've got this kind of quality of ignition, and then we get the softer warmth that the amber is going to provide. But ultimately, it's about finding the combo that works for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I am the most powerful amber combo that I've like come across. And I don't know if it was the stones or if it was the person who set up the grid or whatever, but it was palpable. Was the combination of amber, preonite, and garnet. It was amber, preonite, and garnet, and that three. And I wouldn't have, especially preonite, felt like an outsider, but it's not for all kinds of interesting reasons. But it was a really powerful grid, and the person had set it up for like it was supposed to be to break ancestral curses and things like that. And so she set this beautiful grid, and I got to we were supposed to step over it, and so I stepped over it like 5 times because I was like, "Ooh, you feel that? Ooh, you feel that? Ooh, you feel." It was really cool. So the amber likes to work with other stones. Like I don't think I've had a combo now that I'm thinking about it that where amber has stood out as not being part of that and working well with other stones, and that's always a really fun thing because not all stones like to work together, but I do find that it partners with other stones pretty well. All right, that's awesome. I mean, that's pretty much like that was pretty much it, right? The amber is one of those stones that I think this time of year everyone should be working with, because it does help us deal with winter, and it helps us if you're in the northern hemisphere, that is, and if you're in the southern hemisphere, it's a good time to work with amber for charging up, get that energy, that sun energy charged up in it. That way you have it when you need it. Outside of our needing seasonal help or seasonal support, supplemental energy this time of year, what do you turn to amber for? So let's take it out of the wintry context and let's put it into like an everyday context. Like, what are you working with amber for?
So amber for me is one of those kind of general tonics for wellness. We see it as far back as like the late Stone Age being used as part of like pharmacological tools. Amber's been used for health and healing for millennia and millennia and millennia. And it carried that kind of forward into today. I know a lot of folks will turn to it for a general sense of malaise, whether that's emotional or physical in nature. I think it's also a great ally for tapping into ancient wisdom. It is super old, like maybe 50 million years old, which is a lot older than we are. So Amber has seen some stuff. It's been through things that we can barely conceptualize. So it offers this gift of perspective, and like we see in Jurassic Park, where there's information preserved in amber that can be extracted and used in the right setting, even if that is a work of science fiction. Energetically, there is wisdom contained within amber. It is preserving a piece of the past for us to learn from today. And whether you are a crystal healer or a paleobotanist, you still have the opportunity to learn something from amber. So I think it is great for breaking the really, really deeply held cycles of the soul, whether those are inherited genealogically, the learned patterns that we pick up from our families, our communities, our tribes, from the land itself, whether we believe in the transmigration and reincarnation of the soul and maybe some past life stuff. Is wonderful for that. And it could also just be, hey, this awful thing happened to me 4 years ago and I still haven't let go of it. Get that gift of perspective from amber to help you break that cycle.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. That's awesome. I all of that 100%. I work a lot with amber with my plants because it's liquid sunlight. And so if a plant is struggling or if any of those things, I work a lot with amber with plants. It is expensive. I try not to stick it in the soil because it gets pricey. But it is definitely, working with amber in that way has been incredibly helpful, especially nursing some of these rare babies back to health. And I work with it a lot for general health, so just like you were saying. So it's definitely one of my physical talismans that I work a lot with, and I love amber. It's a phenomenal stone. And then again, as a witch, having that combination of amber and jet, it is very protective, and it is very good for like curse breaking and like all of that good stuff. So it is something that I think likes to work with us. I think it enjoys that process, that engagement. And again, not every stone does. Like I can walk up to, some tanzanite, and tanzanite's kind of grumpy, and it doesn't necessarily want to budge and do stuff, and that's fine because we all have a personality, including our stones. But the personality of amber is quite enjoyable. So, okay, I think that just about does it for today. I will say that I absolutely love Stones of the Goddess, Nicholas. Opened it up again. I was going through it the other day, looking for something for a friend, and I just still find it, even after all these years, to be an invaluable resource. And it lives on my shelf rent free, like literally rent free. I pay its rent. So I just want to say thank you for writing the book, because it's a phenomenal one. And if you haven't checked out Stones of the Goddess, you can get it anywhere. You absolutely should. It is an invaluable resource. So I just wanted to say thank you for that.
Well, thank you and your everything. I mean, I of course love Crystal Magic from Modern Witch, but I actually go back to the exercises in Witch's Book of Power more often than I should admit, or I'm going to come across as a fanboy.
No, I love hearing that. That's well, you know what it's like. You write stuff, and then it's like, does anybody ever give a crap? So Elaine Butler is brought up the Crystal Intensive. So I wanted to mention that real quick before we do sign off. We do have a Crystal Intensive coming up. We did it last year. It was phenomenal. It is such a good time, and you get lifelong access to the stuff. So if you sign up for the class, we update it. The plan is to do it at least once a year and update it each time. And so you get all of that information, you get all of the lessons and then the extra stuff. So everything that's added on. So every year you'll get that extra content. Your crystal intensive will continue no matter what year you sign up. So you'll always have access to that information. You'll always have access to our little online community. And I had such a blast doing it. And we did it differently. So, we record the lessons. There's meditations and things like that. We send that stuff out. People listen to them. They take notes. They read our handouts and all that good stuff. They send us their questions. You and I sit down together. We answer the questions over audio and then send them the response that week. So there's a good turnaround and feedback from us. There's a good turnaround and feedback from the other students. And at the end of it, the goal that we have is to essentially construct a relationship with a crystal familiar. And so it is a crystal magic intensive. It is specifically for people who are witches or magical practitioners who are looking to develop a intense spiritual relationship with a crystal ally. That is one of our main goals with that course. And I love doing it. I freaking love doing it. And this year I've decided I'm going to pick a different stone and I'm going to do everything all over again from the ground up with everyone else, but I'm going to do it with a different stone. And I don't know what stone that is yet, but we're going to figure it out. But it's a really cool thing. You also, we get you signed books, like all of the good stuff. So it's a really good time. What are your thoughts on the intensive? Because we've done it and we're on the other end of it. We're getting ready for another round. What are your thoughts on the Crystal Magic Intensive?
I really loved comparing notes every week when we would jointly cover a topic, and just getting to learn from someone whose practice isn't identical to mine is really great. So ostensibly as the teacher, I'm still learning as well. And then I just think that it's so good to have a multiple perspective to get that kind of plural view of things, and then to see what our community is doing with it. They're taking it and turning it into their own practice, and I learn something from that too.
It's freaking cool. It's so freaking cool. Yeah, it's I learned a lot last year because you really are like a walking encyclopedia when it comes to this stuff. So I learned a whole lot, and I still am referencing conversations we had in the workshop, or in one of the workshops throughout. I still do it. So it's such a good time, and I really enjoy it. And I hope that you guys, if you are out there and you're interested, you have time in February, you should totally check it out. Just go to modernwitch.com and the Crystal Magic Intensive stuff is up there. And we'll talk about it again because we still have some time. So anyway, everybody, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate the time that you took out of your schedule to come hang out with us. And we hope to see you again in just a few more weeks. We'll be back probably after the holidays with some more awesome crystal getting stoned energy vibes goodness over here on the YouTube and Facebook. Don't forget to like and subscribe. That is very, very important. That is very helpful to us. And we are excited to come back. And everyone, hopefully you survive the holidays. Grab that amber, hold it close to your heart. You'll make it through. All right. Love you guys. We'll see you later.